Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
It's good to be back. And today we're tackling a text that I think many people have heard of. Maybe they even read it in school, but I think very few have truly looked at it through this specific lens, the lens of a total system.
Right.
We are talking, of course, about Toni Morrison's Beloved.
This is a big one, and I think for a lot of people, and I'll include myself in this book occupies a really specific space in your head. You know it as a ghost story, or you know it as that book about slavery.
Right, the heavy one.
The heavy one, or specifically the book about the mother who makes that unthinkable choice. It's dense, it's heavy, and honestly, it can be pretty intimidating.
It is intimidating, and it should be. But while all those descriptions are true on a plot level, yes, there's a ghost, yes, it's about slavery. If we stop there, we completely miss the project Morrison was actually undertaking.
And that's what we want to do today, right? We want to break open the mechanism of this book.
Exactly. We aren't just retelling a story, we're trying to analyze a machine.
Which is why we're here, to go deeper. Because when we started looking into the source material for this, the novel itself, of course, but also Morrison's own foreword, the historical context, it just became so clear that this is not just a gothic horror story about a haunted house.
No, not at all.
It's an investigation into a system of logic, an impossible logic, really.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The central premise we really have to start with is this. Slavery in Beloved isn't presented just as, labor exploitation or physical cruelty, though it is absolutely those things.
Of course.
Morrison presents it as a totalizing system, a system that colonizes everything. It colonizes bodies, yes, but it also colonizes memory. It colonizes motherhood. And maybe the most terrifying part, it colonizes the very concept of time itself.
That idea, colonizing time, that's something I really want us to unpack today. Because the sources, they describe this concept of rememory, which is such a specific, haunting word Morrison invented. And it suggests that historical trauma doesn't just end when you sign a paper or cross a border.
It does not end with the Emancipation Proclamation. That is the critical argument right there. Formal emancipation, that's a legal status. It changes your paperwork.
It changes where you're allowed to be, maybe.
Maybe. But the crisis in perception that this book deals with is how do you survive when the system has fundamentally warped your ability to perceive yourself, your children, your past, your future.
So it lingers.
It persists. It persists through environmental triggers, through social structures, and as we'll see, through the literal physical presence of memory.
So just to set the table for everyone listening, this is not going to be a standard book review. We are not going to give you a play-by-play plot summary.
No.
And we are not going to sit here and judge the character's morality. We are not asking the question, did she do the right thing?
No, that would be far too easy. And honestly, it would be missing the entire point of the book.
We're looking at the impossible logic that an inhuman system imposes on human beings. We're looking at systemic trauma.
And that's a heavy lift.
Yeah.
But it is the only way to really understand what Morrison achieved here. She wasn't just writing a tragedy. She was mapping the anatomy of a very specific, very brutal kind of survival.
Okay, so let's start with the architect herself, Toni Morrison. Reading through the foreword that was provided in our stack, I was just so struck by her background before she wrote this. I mean, she wasn't just a writer living in a vacuum. She was a senior editor at Random House for years.
That context is absolutely vital. And she wasn't just editing, run-of-the-mill fiction. She was working with radical Black authors in the 1970s.
Right.
She was Angela Davis's editor. She worked with Huey Newton. She edited Muhammad Ali's autobiography. She was completely immersed in the intellectual and political discourse of Black liberation.
So she understood language's power.
She understood the power of language to shape reality because she was editing the very people who were trying to reshape that reality politically.
And she mentions in that foreword that she wanted to do something very, very specific with Beloved. She talks about writing from inside the Black experience rather than explaining it to a white audience. That seems like a subtle distinction, but changes everything about how the book feels.
It is the crucial distinction. In a lot of literature, even going back to the abolitionist literature from the 19th century, there is this tendency to hold the reader's hand.
To guide them.
Exactly. There's a lobby, as she calls it, or an introduction that basically says, okay, dear reader, you're about to enter a world that is foreign to you. Let me explain the terms. Let me introduce you to these poor, suffering people.
It positions the reader as a tourist.
A tourist, usually a white tourist, looking in from the outside, and that effectively centers the white gaze. even in a story about Black suffering.
It creates a buffer zone, a lobby.
And Morrison said absolutely not. She wanted to remove the lobby entirely. She used this very specific, very aggressive phrase for it. She said she wanted to kidnap the reader.
Kidnap the reader. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a violent image for an author to use about her own audience.
But it fits the system she's describing, doesn't it? She wanted to throw the reader into an alien environment without any preparation, just as the characters themselves were snatched from Africa or snatched from their homes and moved to a plantation.
So the disorientation you feel when you start reading is intentional.
It is by design. That confusion you feel when you start Beloved, that feeling of who is speaking right now, what year is it, what is real and what isn't, you are supposed to feel unmoored.
It's the literary equivalent of being just dropped into the deep end of a pool. You open to page 1, and the house is screaming, numbers are flashing, there are no introductions, and you literally do not know where you are.
And you have to scramble to find your footing. That's meant to mirror the experience of the enslaved person entering the plantation economy. There is no orientation day, there is just immediate chaotic survival.
So by refusing to explain, she forces you to experience a tiny fraction of that
A
panic.
fraction, yes. She makes you work for it.
Now, we have to talk about the historical seed of this story,
Yeah.
because it's not entirely fiction. The sources mention Margaret Garner. This was a real person, correct?
Yes, absolutely. This is the historical reality that grounds the whole fictional project. Margaret Garner was a real fugitive slave who escaped from Kentucky into Ohio in January of 1856.
In the middle of winter.
A bitterly cold winter. The Ohio River was frozen solid, which is actually what allowed them to cross on foot. But when the U.S. Marshals caught up with her in Cincinnati, she attempted to kill her children rather than let them be returned to slavery.
And she succeeded with one.
She succeeded in killing one of them, a 2-year-old daughter, by cutting her throat.
It's just an incredibly dark, almost unimaginable moment in history. And in the source material, Morrison notes that the historical Margaret Garner immediately became this cause célèbre.
Oh, instantly.
Right.
The abolitionists used her story. The newspapers used her story. She became a symbol.
A pawn.
A pawn, exactly. The abolitionists held her up and said, look at the horrors of slavery. It drives a mother to this. And the pro-slavery advocate said, look, these people are savages. They kill their own children. Her actual humanity, her interior life was completely lost in the public argument.
But Morrison makes this really fascinating point in the foreword. She says that the historical facts were confining to her as a novelist, which sounds so counterintuitive. You'd think having all the facts makes the story easier to write.
Facts tell you what happened. They don't tell you how it felt to be inside that moment. Morrison wasn't interested in the court case. She wasn't interested in the op-eds.
She wanted the interiority.
She needed to invent the subtext. She wanted to explore, and this is her phrase, the intellectual and ferocious logic of a mother who claims ownership of her child by killing it.
Ferocious logic. That phrase just, it really stuck with me because from the outside, looking at it through a modern lens or even a standard moral lens, it just looks like madness. It looks like a psychotic break.
Of course.
But Morrison is arguing that within the logic of the system of slavery, it's a calculated, rational, even a loving act.
Exactly. It's an act of claiming. If the system says, this child is my property, and the mother says, no, this child is mine, the only way to make that true and that specific moment of total entrapment might be to remove the child from the system's reach entirely.
Even if it means death.
Even if it means death. It's a terrifying paradox. I will kill you to keep you safe. I will kill you to keep you mine.
And that really sets up our analytical stance for this whole deep dive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That Beloved refuses to sanitize slavery. It's not a redemption narrative. We are not here to say, and then they got free and everything was okay.
Not at all. As Morrison puts it, the book invites the reader to pitch a tent in a cemetery inhabited by highly vocal ghosts.
What a line.
It's about the chaos of the needy dead disrupting the quietude of the living. It's messy, it's loud, it is profoundly uncomfortable. And it absolutely refuses to give us a clean, easy resolution.
So let's get into that mess. Let's look at the core systems analysis. The book sets up this really interesting contrast between two types of slave owners, and this is where I think that crisis in perception really kicks in. We start at the Sweet Home Plantation in Kentucky.
Right. And you have two distinct eras there. You have the era of Mr. Garner and then the era of schoolteacher.
And at first glance, Mr. Garner seems, I'm going to put this in heavy air quotes, better.
Better, yeah.
He allowed his male slaves to carry guns. He let them make some decisions. He even called them men. He didn't seem to beat them arbitrarily.
He took a strange sort of pride in it. He would brag to his neighbors, "My knickers are men." It was a vanity project for him. He wanted to prove that his way of management was superior, that if you treated them just slightly better, you got better work out of them.
But there's a trap in that.
There's the systemic trap, and it's one Morrison exposes so ruthlessly. That manhood, that little bit of autonomy, it relied entirely on the benevolence of one single individual owner.
So it wasn't structural.
It wasn't structural freedom. It was a permission slip.
A permission slip that could be revoked at any moment.
And it was. It was revoked the second he died. And that is the lesson. If your freedom depends on the mood or the generosity or the lifespan of your master, you are not free. You are just a pet on a slightly longer leash.
Exactly. The system corrects itself. When Garner dies, the system, and it's personified by this terrifying character called school teacher, it arrives to correct the anomaly.
Right.
School teacher looks at these men who can read, who carry guns, who have a sense of self, and he says, no, this is incorrect. You are animals.
And school teacher is such a terrifying villain because he isn't a screaming sadist. He isn't, just a brute.
No, he's worse.
He's worse because he represents the so-called scientific racism of the era. He's an intellectual. He comes with a notebook. He comes with a measuring tape. He wants to study them like specimens. He wants to classify them and put them in their proper place.
There's a scene that just perfectly encapsulates this shift. It's about the character Sixo, one of the Sweet Home men. He gets caught having stolen a shut, a young pig, and school teacher confronts him.
This is one of the most brilliant philosophical moments in the entire book. It's a dialogue about the nature of logic and power. School teacher asks him straight up, "Did you steal that shoat?"
And Sixo says no. He argues he didn't steal it. He says, and I'm paraphrasing, "I didn't steal the shoat. I cooked and ate the shoat to make myself stronger. And since I am your property, making myself stronger improves your property."
It's impeccable logic.
It is absolute, airtight, flawless logic. If he's a tool, then maintaining the tool is just valid maintenance. He's using the master's own definitions right back at him. He's saying, if I am a thing, then feeding me is just oiling the machine.
But school teacher doesn't accept it, does he?
No, he beats him.
And why does he beat him? He beats him because Sixo tried to define the situation. The lesson isn't don't steal.
Yeah.
The lesson is definitions belong to the definers, not the defined. It doesn't matter how logical Sixo is. He does not have the power to define reality. That is the absolute essence of the system. Power is the ability to say what a thing is.
And school teacher beats him to prove that logic is irrelevant. Only hierarchy matters.
Exactly.
And that loss of definition, it extends to the most intimate parts of life. We have to talk about the milk.
We do. It is the central trauma for Sith. It is the thing she circles back to over and over and over.
Seath, our protagonist, she acts as the lens for this. When she's remembering her trauma at Sweet Home, she doesn't focus on the physical beatings nearly as much as she focuses on the moment school teacher's nephews held her down in the barn and took her milk.
This is such a pivotal moment for understanding slavery as total domination. Seath had a nursing baby at the time. That milk represented her weirhood, her ability to nurture, the one thing she produced that was for her child and not for the master.
It was biological proof of her humanity.
And her connection to her offspring, yes. And they stole it. They didn't just spill it. They nursed from her while school teachers stood there taking notes.
They treated her like a cow.
Yeah.
Like livestock.
They did. And we have to analyze this as the ultimate systemic theft. It isn't just the theft of labor, picking cotton or cutting cane. It is the theft of the biological capacity to be a mother. In this system, enslaved women are not supposed to have children in the sense that we understand it, of parenting them. They are supposed to breed them.
As capital.
As capital. So when Seth says, they took my milk, she's saying they took her motherhood. She's saying they took her nature. They collapsed the distinction between her being a human woman and her being an animal.
And that violation is what propels her toward the act of infanticide. She refuses to let that system own her children in that way ever again.
She would rather they be dead than be milked like cattle. She is trying to save them from being turned into animals in the system's eyes.
This violence gets inscribed literally on her body, too. We have the image of the tree on her back. This is the scar tissue from a horrific whipping she received when she tried to tell Mrs. Garner about the milk incident.
Yes. And this brings us to this idea of the aestheticization of trauma. Amy Denver, the young white girl who helps Seth escape, looks at this horrific, gnarled mass of dead skin and keloid scars, and she calls it a choke cherry tree.
She describes the trunk and the branches and even the blossoms. It's a very lyrical, almost beautiful description.
It's a moment of just terrible dissonance. For Amy, looking from the outside, and she is sympathetic, she's not being cruel, it's a piece of art, it has a shape, it has a strange beauty. But for Seeth, it's just dead skin. She can't feel it. It is a numbness that she carries around on her back.
It's a sculpture that was created by the system, carved right into her flesh.
Exactly. The system literally uses her body as a canvas for its violence, and she has to carry that tree for the rest of her life, even though she can't even see it herself. Only others can see it. It's a permanent mark of ownership that she cannot erase, and it's a mark that others reinterpret for her.
That leads us directly into the concept of memory. Because just like that tree is physically there on her back, Morrison introduces this concept of rememory.
Rememory. It's a word Seeth invents, but in the universe of this book, it is a very real physical law. It's not just a poetic term for, nostalgia or bad memory.
Seeth explains this to her daughter, Denver. And she says, rememory isn't just in your head, it's a picture floating outside in the world.
Right. She explains it spatially. She says, and this is the key, if a house burns down, it's gone, but the picture of it stays.
That is such a frightening idea. That means trauma is environmental.
It's
not just psychological, it's geographical.
It means the past has a geography. It implies that if you, as a completely innocent person, walk into the physical space where something terrible happened, you can bump into that memory. You can literally step inside someone else's trauma.
Wow. It's like a psychic landmine that never deactivates, or like radiation. You can't see it, but if you walk into the zone, it affects you.
And that creates a world where you are never, ever safe. You can't just move on because the past is physically waiting for you around the next corner. The world is cluttered with the psychic debris of slavery. And this validates the experience of trauma survivors who feel like they're constantly reliving an event. Morrison is saying, yes, that's because the event is still there.
And Seeth's own mind, her brain, becomes an enemy in this system. The source text talks about her devious brain.
Seeth works incredibly hard to repress the past. She actively tries to remember, as the text says, as close to nothing as was safe.
She keeps her world very, very small.
Very small. But the system of slavery has corrupted even the beauty of the world. She can't trust her own memories.
There's that passage where she tries to think of the beautiful sycamore trees at Sweet Home.
She wants to remember the trees. It should be a nice, simple memory of nature. But she can't remember the trees without also remembering the boys hanging from them. The landscape itself is treacherous. Every beautiful memory has been poisoned by the system that owned that landscape. So her brain is constantly betraying her, bringing up the horror when she just wants to see the leaves.
Which brings us to the ultimate manifestation of this past that won't die, the ghost.
The ghost, beloved.
The book starts with that iconic line, 124 was spiteful, 124 being the house number.
And notice that it's a number, not a name. It isolates them. And the house has a personality. It's loud, it's angry, it throws things. But we have to look at beloved, the entity, as a structural symbol, not just as a simple poltergeist. This is not The Conjuring.
Right. She appears first as the baby ghost, the spiteful presence in the house, but then later she returns as a flesh and blood woman who walks out of the creek.
She represents the return of the repressed. That's a Freudian concept, but here it's being applied to history. But she isn't just Seeth's dead baby. If she were just the baby, the book would be a powerful family drama, but it would be contained. Morrison does something much, much bigger.
The sources mention the dedication of the book. 60 million and more.
That refers to the estimated number of people who died during the Middle Passage, the journey across the Atlantic from Africa to the Americas. Beloved represents them. She is the collective avatar of all the lost souls.
There's the description of Beloved when she first manifests as this young woman. She has new skin, unlined hands. She craves sugar.
She's like a child. She has the cravings and the fragility of a toddler. But then you listen to her monologue from the dark place. This is later in the book in the second section. It's the stream of consciousness. And she talks about men without skin. She talks about crouching in a space where you can't move.
Right.
She talks about urine and the bridge.
The bridge? What is the bridge?
The bridge is the slave ship. The men without skin are the white captors. Morrison collapses time here. It's genius. Beloved is simultaneously the 2-year-old toddler whose throat was cut in a woodshed in Ohio, and she is an ancestor crouching in the filthy hold of a slave ship crossing the Atlantic 200 years earlier.
That's mind-blowing. So she is the embodiment of all that denied history.
She is the disremembered and unaccounted for. She creates a bridge between the personal, individual trauma of Seeth and the massive collective historical trauma of the entire diaspora. She is All of it compressed into one physical body. She speaks for the people who were thrown overboard and never got a name.
And she is parasitic. We have to say that.
That is absolutely key. We cannot romanticize her. We might want to pity her, and on some level we do, but she is dangerous. She consumes Seth. As the book goes on, Beloved gets bigger, she gets plumper, she becomes pregnant with Memory, while Seth starves. Seth literally shrinks.
Because engaging with that much unprocessed past without any kind of protection, it just eats you alive.
Exactly. If you lock yourself in a house with the past, it will devour you. This is why the isolation of 124 is so dangerous. You cannot handle that much history alone. The individual human spirit isn't strong enough to carry 60 million ghosts by itself.
So let's talk about that isolation, because this is System's story, and systems involve communities. Seth and her family are ostracized by their community.
They are, and it's not just because she killed her child. That's part of it, of course. But the text suggests the community turned on her before that because of her pride.
She threw that feast.
She threw a feast she couldn't afford with 2 whole pies, celebrating a freedom she hadn't quite secured. And it sparked jealousy in the community. They thought she was putting on airs. They thought, who does she think she is, acting like she has plenty when the rest of us have nothing?
But the real failure, the systemic failure of the community, was the look.
The look, yes.
What was that?
When school teacher and the sheriff and the slave catchers arrived to take Seeth and her children back, the community saw them coming. They recognized the look of the slave catchers, the felt hat, the way they rode their horses. They knew. But nobody warned Seeth.
The alarm system failed.
The collective warning system failed completely. Their silence, which was born of jealousy and spite over those pies, allowed the tragedy to happen. If they had warned her, she might have run. She might have hidden the children. Instead, she was cornered and she snapped.
So the community bears some structural responsibility for what happened. They broke the chain of protection.
They did. But they are also, in the end, the key to healing. And for that, we have to talk about Baby Suggs.
Baby Suggs, holy, Seeth's mother-in-law. She preaches in the clearing. But it's not conventional religion she's preaching. She isn't reading from the Bible.
She preaches the religion of flesh. And this is one of the most powerful systemic rebuttals in all of literature. She takes the people into the woods, into this free space, the clearing, and she tells them, yonder, they do not love your flesh.
They despise it.
She lists the body parts, your eyes, your back, your hands, your neck. She says the system is designed to chop you up, to bind you, to flay these parts. The white world sees your body as a thing to be used or destroyed. So the only resistance, the only way to survive is to love your own flesh.
Love your heart, for this is the prize.
It is a radical, radical reclaiming of the body. If the system says your body is a commodity for labor and breeding, Baby Suggs says your body is a temple for self-love and communal love. It's a counter system. She's trying to build a fortress of self-love to withstand the constant assault. She's saying, you must love what the world hates about you.
But even Baby Suggs breaks. After the infanticide, she gives up. She goes to bed to just ponder color.
Because the white people came into her yard. Her one safe space, the community she built, was violated. When Seeth killed the baby, Baby Suggs realized that all her goodwill and her powerful preaching, it wasn't enough to stop the system from jumping the fence and coming for them. She died of a broken heart, essentially. She realized there was no true safety, not even in the clearing.
So how does the healing finally happen? Because the ghost is eventually driven out. The book doesn't end in total despair.
It happens through what we can call collective witnessing.
The climax of the book.
It is. Denver, the surviving daughter, finally leaves the yard. That's the first step. She steps off the porch. She breaks the isolation of 124, and she goes to the community for help. She swallows her pride, and she asks for work, for food, for connection.
And the women return, about 30 of them.
They return to the yard of 124, and what do? It's so important. They don't pray. They don't read scripture. The source says they holler.
They just make a sound.
They make a sound that broke the back of words. Healing requires a pre-verbal, collective sound. It requires the community to look at the trauma, to bear witness to it, and to scream at it together. That communal sound breaks the isolation and is what finally drives the ghost away.
It pushes the past back into its proper place.
It doesn't erase the past, but it disarms it. It puts it at a distance so that Seth can finally live. It's the community saying, we see you, we acknowledge this ghost, and we are sending it away together. It restores the alarm system that failed so catastrophically in the beginning.
And then Baldy returns. And he has that beautiful, simple line to Steve. She's mourning the loss of beloved, who she thinks was her best thing. She thinks her only value was in her children. And what does Paul D say?
He says, your best thing, Steve. You are.
And that shifts the entire locus of value. It moves it from the children, from her production, back to the self.
Which is the ultimate defiance of the slave system, to say, I am valuable not for what I produce, not for who I mother, but simply for who I am. It reclaims the human subject. It asserts that she exists for herself, which is the one thing slavery denies.
I want to look at the present-day implications of this, because we promise this isn't just a story about 1873. We see the effects on the next generation so clearly through Denver.
Denver is the living child of trauma. She literally goes deaf for a period of time in the book.
She goes deaf when she asks about her mother's crime, right? She doesn't want to hear the answer.
Exactly. She creates what the book calls an emerald closet. It's a sensory deprivation tank of her own making to avoid hearing the truth. This is a perfect depiction of intergenerational trauma. Denver is afraid of her own mother. She's afraid that the thing that happened to her baby sister will happen to her.
So she protects the ghost, beloved, to protect herself from her mother.
Precisely. The system of fear that was created by slavery now shapes her behavior. A generation later, she becomes agoraphobic. She can't leave the house. This shows us exactly how historical trauma trickles down. The children didn't experience the whip, but they experience the fear of the whip that lives inside their parents. They inherit the defensive crouch.
And then there's the ending of the book, that repeated, haunting phrase, "It was not a story to pass on."
This is the politics of forgetting. It's such a profound paradox. Morrison writes this incredible, unforgettable book to ensure the story is passed on to us, the readers. But the characters within the book, they need to forget it to survive.
The community forgets beloved quickly, like a bad dream, the book says.
Because you cannot build a future if you are constantly, actively reliving the middle passage. There is this deep tension in the book between the need to remember, to validate the suffering, to honor the dead, and the need to forget in order to function day to day. If you stare at the sun of slavery for too long, you will go blind.
So the kind of cultural erasure is a survival mechanism.
In a way, yes. The book argues that we must confront the ghost. We have to dig it up, look at it, acknowledge it, name it. But we cannot live with it in the house with us forever. We have to bury it properly so we can go on living.
Connecting this back to our channel's theme, crisis and perception, the crisis here seems to be about how the system lingers long after it's officially gone.
Systems persist. Slavery ended formally in 1865. But look at school teacher's notebook. He was writing a book about them. He was measuring their heads, listing their animal characteristics next to their human ones. That scientific perception of Black people as animals is data points. That perception did not go away with the 13th Amendment.
It's the datification of human beings, treating them as objects of study.
And the crisis is also internal. It's the inability to see oneself outside of the system's definitions. Steve's crime, her terrible choice, was a desperate attempt to seize control of the definition of motherhood for herself.
Even if it meant death.
Even if it meant death. As Paul D says, her love was too thick. The system warped a natural, beautiful human emotion, a mother's love, into something monstrous and destructive because safety was impossible. That is the crisis. When love becomes a killer because the system allows for no other safe option,
it redefines what survival even means.
It does. Survival isn't just staying alive physically. It's about keeping the best thing, the self intact, against a system designed to annihilate it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just reflect for a moment on what Beloved forces us to see differently.
I think it forces us to see freedom not as a static state, not just not being a slave, but as an active, incredibly difficult, lifelong process of claiming ownership of the freed self.
And it reframes memory not as just a mental act, something in your head, but as a physical danger, a geography that you have to learn to navigate.
And it leaves us with that final haunting image. The ghost is gone, but the text says the rustle of skirts remains. The footprints come and go by the stream. It's not completely gone.
The system leaves a trace, a rememory in the landscape.
It never fully vanishes. You can clear the house, you can heal the community, but the trace remains. And our job as readers, as people living in the present, is to recognize it, to perceive it, so it doesn't consume us again.
Wow. Okay. That is a lot to sit with. And I hope everyone listening takes a moment to really let that sink in.
It's a book that absolutely demands that kind of attention.
It really does. Credits where they are due. Beloved was written by the incomparable Toni Morrison. If you haven't read it, or if you read it years ago in a rush for a class, please go back, read it, borrow it from your library. It is a monumental text. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer link in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.